Music got me through some of the hardest days and the hardest nights I had over 19 years in prison. It was when I could lock that cell door and know nobody is coming in and I don't have to go out. I could put those headphones on, I could close my eyes, and I could just melt away into that music. It was the closest I came to escaping. Because when I was listening to that music on my bunk with my eyes closed, I didn't feel like I was in prison. I felt like I was somewhere far, far away. When I first got locked up, I went to the jail. I was there for about 10 months. And there you could buy a little AM/FM radio. This little thing that had terrible reception. You had to be near a window, or if you were in the inside part, you couldn't get reception. But we'd listen to local stations. That meant the stations that I grew up listening to. All those were there, and the local community radio station would allow people to do shout-outs and do requests, and so it allowed us to interact with the community. We would hear people doing shout-outs to somebody who was locked up, or doing a request for somebody who was locked up, or guys would call in from the jail and do requests for their girl on the outside. It was a cool way to stay involved. From there, I got sent to Powhatan, which was a receiving prison. We couldn't buy a tape player, we couldn't buy anything. If we still had our radio, we could listen to that. And there were still some stations there, so I got to listen to different stations. I remember that was the first time I listened to Alice's Restaurant, because they did it for Thanksgiving. And I was like, this is wild, this is great. And I really love that song. I still try to listen to it every Thanksgiving, but it just gave me a different exposure. Then from there, I got sent to Nottoway Correctional Center, and that was a different experience because there were hardly any radio stations. Like, we're in the middle of nowhere. So instead of being able to listen to new music and what's going on and all the things that I grew up around, it was like one station, and you were lucky if you got it, and you could only get it at night when things bounced off the clouds the right way. But we could buy tape players. And this was 2003 by the time I made it to the prison. We could buy tape players, and I was excited because I was like, man, cool, like I can listen to music. Now, looking back, especially younger people, they're like, tape player? Yeah, like an old cassette tape, like the thing you put in. But you could only order from a couple places because they were worried about contraband. So there's different spots you could order tapes from, usually up in New York. We could look down the list and we could find stuff. And I was listening to old music at that point, like Johnny Cash and Alanis Morissette and whatever else, some harder stuff. But it was the experience of like being able to choose what I listened to. Because on the radio, we didn't get a choice. We just heard whatever came on. And you could try to find the right DJ or the right whatever. But then at Nottoway, you basically didn't get to hear anything. So you had to have those tapes. We would trade them around, and it was exciting. And that's where I would learn about different music, because somebody would have a different tape. And then in 2004, they started selling CD players, like in the middle of the year. So all of a sudden, you couldn't buy a tape player anymore. You had to buy a CD player. We could still buy tapes for a while after that. But eventually that became, kind of old and defunct. So I had to buy a CD player, and then I could buy CDs from same thing, these different sources. So I'd write up to the one in New York, I'd get a catalog, I'd be all excited, I'd see what was coming out, maybe write a special letter and say, hey, do you have any like new releases? The problem was not having radio stations. I didn't necessarily know what was coming out or what I liked. There's some guys who got like hip hop or pop magazines that would talk about new music, but at that point I really had no idea. So I would just kind of guess. I would maybe see something on TV, on a morning show or on a late night show, and I'd be like, oh, I like that. Otherwise, I'd just be scanning through there and be like, hey, let's try this one. And we didn't have a lot of money. You got to remember, I made between 27 and 45 cents an hour, so it was a big deal to spend money. And I did get money from the street sometimes. So I did have people who helped me buy commissary or help me pay phone calls or other things. But it was one of those things early on where it was a major investment to buy a CD. Just buying the CD player was like $50. And this is an old, clear, junky CD player that doesn't even work very well. But did that, was exposed to some new music, really enjoyed it. And it stayed that way for years. I mean, it stayed that way until I think 2015, though along the way I found this magazine. It was called The Week. It's basically just a collection of all the news stories, like locally, nationally, and internationally from around the world. But one section they would have was about books and another one about music. And I would always look in there and find out what was new or what was trending or what was good. And it was really diverse. It was really eclectic. So it wasn't like it was just going to be one type or one topic. It gave me exposure to a lot of different things. And I remember I would choose music out of there, and that was where I saw Amy Winehouse, Back in Black. And I was just like, oh, it's got good reviews, let me listen to it. And I remember when I bought that CD and I got it, I was just like, oh my, like this is incredible. Like, I just remember her voice being absolutely magical and feeling like this is going to change the face of music. Maybe if she had lived longer, if she had made different decisions or gotten the support she needed, maybe she would have changed the face of music. But at least temporarily, sitting in that prison cell, she changed the face of music for me. Then in 2015, there was a radical revolution. Because rather than CD players, which we suddenly couldn't buy anymore, they brought in kiosks. And what the kiosk was basically a computer that was bolted to the wall, but all these security things. And it was connected to the internet, but not like the wider internet, only like one thing. So JPay, which is a for-profit music and email service, basically connects to them and only them. You can't go on, Gmail, you can't go on Google, you can't go on anything else. You're only going to them. But what you could do is you could buy MP3s through them. So we could also get these players. Originally it was like a JP3 and then a JP4. JP3 we need batteries for, so we would buy batteries by the dozens because it would eat them up like crazy. And then we'd buy rechargeable batteries and use those like crazy, and then they were expensive. But finally we get to the JP5. And what this was basically a decommissioned phone. And so on it, we could listen to music, and later on the JP5s, we could even watch videos, like educational videos. And so we could download the music from the kiosk to there. We got a little USB cord, we would get our player, and we could go on there, and the best part of it was we could preview the music. So we'd look up an artist, and they would have random stuff like German Christmas carols of all things, like thousands, tens or hundreds of thousands of songs, but not necessarily stuff we wanted because it was all about contracts. So this was a major release. They might not get it because the record label may not want to deal with JPEG. So we would not have stuff that was being talked about on all the airwaves, but we would have stuff that was available only to us, like German Christmas carols. So we would get there, we could preview. What it allowed us to do was actually figure out whether we liked something or not. So if we heard about it, we could pull this person up and listen to their song. I think you'd listen to like 10 seconds of the song. So a lot of times, I mean, for months and months, the kiosk was packed because it's only one person. You get a 15-minute session. People would be lined up waiting because they want to go on there and listen to songs. They want to go on there and preview stuff and go on and figure out whatever. And then some guys who had money would put hundreds and hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars on there and just download all the music they wanted. So we're able to listen to what we wanted, but also hear ahead of time. So it wasn't just that random gamble of sending off for a CD and hoping, well, I hope I like this artist, or I hope I like this album or this song. So we could do that, and we downloaded hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of songs. But it wasn't like iTunes, or I don't even know what iTunes was because I was in prison, so I didn't get to see it. But it was $1.99 a song. So that meant if you bought 10 songs, you're talking about $19.99. It was not a cheap thing, though albums were cheaper. You might get an album for like 13 or 16, which is, I think, what CDs were back then. So it was fairly reasonable. But what it was for songs, like if there's just one song you like, you're paying $2 for it. And, you know, that seemed like a lot. It wasn't necessarily the best deal, but it allowed you to just get that thing you wanted, especially if you didn't have that $13 or $16. Because remember, making 27, 35, or 45 cents an hour, we didn't have a lot of money, and we had to buy the original JP3s. Now, eventually, the JP5s, they just started giving them out because I realized the money was in the emails, which you had to pay 25 or 50 cents to send an email, basically the length of a text, where the money was in the music. So they started giving out the old decommissioned phones for free because they probably bought them for pennies on the dollar because nobody wanted a phone that was 5 years old or 10 years old or however old it was. So we had these little clear decommissioned phones. We could listen to our music, and it was huge because now rather than trading tapes or trading CD players, we would just trade players. And they all had passwords on them, so you would trade, and you had to trust somebody because you wouldn't want them to be able to read your emails as well, which they could do. But if you knew somebody, you'd be like, okay, cool, you buy that album, I'll buy this one, and then we'll just trade. And you trade for the day, you listen to their album, you listen to them 10 albums or 100 albums or whatever. So we got exposed to a lot more music because there was a lot more available. And it was cool because you would sometimes do it across the yard. Like we had 2 separate types of the yard. So you would have like 4 pods on this side and 4 pods on that side, or 4 buildings on this side, 4 buildings on that side. And you were able to say, hey, okay, I'm going to throw you my player for a week and then send me yours back. We could still write emails and receive emails in the kiosk, or we could download them onto our player and then write and receive them on the player, but we had to still connect to the kiosk to be able to send them back out. But it was such a cool thing to have access to this technology. I remember the first time it played a video, a Khan Academy educational video, I didn't believe the screen would do that because the JP5s didn't, excuse me, the JP3s didn't do that. Like, I'd never seen anything with a screen on it, like a touch screen that could play videos. That was magical to me because you gotta remember, when I went to prison, I had one of the Nokia block phones that had the Snake game. Like, there was pixels that I could actually see. There was definitely not a video you could play on there. So I remember being amazed when I saw just how much was possible, and that was my introduction to technology. That was my introduction to smartphones, basically. So when I got out of prison, I had experience because I'd been using those decommissioned Android smartphones. So I had an idea of what I was doing. That's why I got an Android phone when I first got out, because I didn't know what the hell to do with an iPhone, but I knew how to use those. Then eventually my friends in the social media world like bullied me into getting an iPhone, which I'm still not sure was a good idea, but they bullied me and I let it happen, so I just have to accept it. But listening to music, being able to share music, being able to learn about other music was such a cool thing, because sometimes it was, I don't know if that I ever bought German Christmas carols, but I learned about opera because I had somebody who was writing me from Singapore who was like, yeah, I used to only like death metal, but then I started listening to opera and I realized it has the same kind of gravitas and the same kind of feel of it. So I started listening to O Mio Babino Caro and other arias and being like, oh my God, like this is like shockingly, deeply, humanly beautiful. Like I want to hear more of this. So I would do that, or I would buy a collection of classical music. Sometimes there would be articles that are not brand names, so it would just be like a collection of classical songs, and that might be half the price. That'd only be $7 or $10, or sometimes they would even make a mistake in JPay, and something that was supposed to be $20 would only be $2, and if you bought it, you might only have 6 hours or a day to buy it, but if you got it, you could just keep it because you'd already downloaded it. So I'd get these collections of classical music or these collections of whatever just to learn about more music because I wanted to learn about the world and I was locked in a cage, but I could learn through music, through this internet connection that wasn't really an internet connection. It was really awesome because music not only helped me cope in those low moments, like when I lost my dad or when things went bad or when I just felt completely hopeless and I could melt into the music or melt into the headphones, but that also helped me learn more about the world, more about what people are listening to to in Germany, or what classical music people really like in Singapore, or what opera really moves somebody. And then I could connect with that, and it allowed me to connect with them, because music was one of those things that really helped me connect with people as much as it helped me connect with myself.